Hello and welcome to Dressmaking More. Today I'm going to show you how to sew this stunningly romantic long dress that flows around you with its gathered ruffle tiers that make up the elegant skirt. This dress has a slightly raised waistline and the long balloon sleeves gathered with comfy elastic paired with a sophisticated crew neckline with a little keyhole opening at the back will make you feel absolutely ethereal. We're going to use our poppy dress PDF sewing pattern, so to follow along, get yours at the link below in the description. Here are the materials you'll need. I'm using this beautiful poppy print chiffon fabric for that light, perfectly draping look. I recommend using something like a cotton, linen, or rayon challis for easy handling of the fabric, or a gauze, chiffon, or satin for a silkier look. So cut your pattern pieces from your fabric and make sure to transfer all the marks to make it easier to sew in the process. And of course, there are detailed instructions on exactly how to do this in your pattern booklet. Here are the pattern pieces: front, back, sleeve, neckline bias, skirt front and back, as well as the first and second ruffle tier pattern piece. Okay, let's get to sewing. Take your front bodice piece and transfer the darts to the other side of the fabric. We'll do this by placing a pin at the point and making sure that all of your notches and marks are transferred from the paper pattern to the fabric. Flip it around and place another pin at the center point. Then take the fabric off the paper pattern that has the first pin, and now we want to flip the bodice piece and place another pin at the point. Now separating the two halves, we have two pins indicating the dart point. Folding our marks together to form the dart, lay out the fabric cleanly and pin the whole dart. As a guide, you can draw a line where you will sew the dart, so repeat this to the other side as well, just like so. Sew the darts and press them from the wrong side. And press them from the right side as well. At the back pattern piece of the bodice, we have the marks at the top here and at the bottom edge, so make sure you've transferred them. Pay close attention to the two marks at the back armhole, and this mark here at the side indicates the 2 cm seam allowance. This will come in handy if you need to make any adjustments. Pin the center back seam and sew from the mark down. Press the seam and then press it open, following the fold line up to the top edge where we haven't sewn yet. Now fold each edge of the seam allowances inside to hide the raw edge and pin. Then press. And I'm using glasshead pins so they don't melt under the heat of the iron. I've got a link for you in the description of this video. Top stitch the seam allowances 2 mm from the edge, with the stitch being around 4 to 5 mm wide. Remember that when we sew thin, delicate fabrics, don't sew starting right at the top edge. Here's what it looks like. Now top stitch the other side of the seam allowances, the same 2 mm from the edge. And because we pressed it down beforehand, everything goes smoothly. Here are our 2 stitched sides, and here at the top we're going to have our back opening loop, so press and cool down with a clapper. Place the front and back right sides together and pin the shoulder seams. Then sew and press the shoulder seams. Next is our neckline. Instead of using the same pattern fabric for the bias binding, I'll actually use a different colored fabric so that you can see what I'm doing better. So first, press the bias to smooth it out, and then fold the bias binding in half, wrong sides together, and press. With our bodice laying right side up, pin the bias to the neckline, leaving about an inch longer at the ends. So pin all around as it lays naturally, and if you like, for added stability, first make a stay stitch before sewing the bias on the machine. Sew the bias to the neckline from the bias side around 5 mm from the edge without stretching the neckline as you sew. Now fold the seam allowances towards the binding and understitch the binding just like this. Turning the folded edge of the bias away from your scissors, trim away the seam allowances. Now cut a bias strip 3 cm wide and around 10 inches long to form a loop for the closure. Fold the bias in half, right sides together, and draw a guideline that looks like a funnel around 3 mm or 1/8 of an inch from the folded edge. Sew on the guideline. And we're making a longer strip than necessary so that we have that nice, straight and even stitch to work with. Then trim the seam allowances, leaving just 2 to 3 mm. Use a loop turner to turn it out, and press. Then cut a length that's right for your buttons, plus the seam allowances. Mine turned out to be 4 centimeters. Take the neckline and trim the ends of the binding to 1 centimeter, folding it in towards the seam allowances and secure it in place for it to look like this. Then fold your button loop and place it under the seam line, flip the neckline binding over the loop and pin, then sew the loop to secure it, and then continue to sew the binding around the neckline with the ends of the binding hiding right under. Sew 1 to 2 millimeters from the folded edge of the binding. Here's our beautiful neckline edge that we're going to press next. And because the side seams aren't sewn yet, it's very easy to press the neckline smooth. To finish this section, sew the button to the side of the back neckline opposite the loop. Sew and press the side seams of the bodice. Then serge the hem of the sleeve, sew and press the sleeve side seams as well, and press the seam allowances to one side. Placing your seam in the middle of your sleeve like this, place 2 pins at the top edge right where the fold starts. You can mark these points, as this section here is where we're going to place the gathering stitch. So place the gathering seam from pin to pin at the top edge of the sleeve. The gathered stitch here is about 4 to 5 millimeters wide. Having our bodice and sleeves in front of us, wrong sides up, pin the sleeve into the armhole, matching the back marks, front marks, as well as the center mark with the shoulder seam. Pull out the threads of the sleeve to gather it and match the armhole and pin all around, and sew. Press the seam as it is to flatten the seam allowances, and then press the seam allowances towards the sleeve from the right side. Pin the sleeve elastic and sew it into a circle and mark the quarters. And mark the quarters at the hem of the sleeve as well. Pin the elastic to the wrong side of the sleeve, matching the quarter marks. And then sew with the seam going in the middle of the elastic. Stretch just the elastic while sewing to gather the fabric underneath. And after we sew, fold the elastic towards the wrong side of the dress and stitch 2 millimeters from the elastic edge. Moving on to the skirt, pin and sew the side seams. Also, pin and sew the side seams of the first and second ruffle tiers. Press all the side seams of the skirt and ruffles, then place gathering stitches 4 to 5 millimeters wide at the top edge of the skirt. If you want very neat gathers, then do 2 rows of gathering stitches 4 millimeters apart, but if slightly chaotic ruffles suit you just fine, you can sew 1 simple row. And I do leave a little space here so that the threads won't tangle or get in the way of each other when we pull them to make the gathers. Mark the quarters on the bodice and on the waistline of the skirt. Place the skirt into the bodice, right sides together, matching the center front of the skirt with the center front of the bodice. And I'm pinning at a cross with 2 pins so that they stay in place. Matching the side seams of the skirt and bodice, pull at the threads of the skirt to gather it, and then pin to the bodice waistline. Sew from the gathering side to have more control over it, and you can help yourself with the pin just like this. Finish the edges and then press and take out the gathering stitch. And we're going to repeat these steps to sew the first and second ruffle tiers. Now for the hem. Because our skirt is cut on a straight line, a double folded hem will be really easy to do. So fold the edge once and then fold a second time and sew. And then press. For the optional additional waist tie, we're going to sew all the pieces of the waist tie together to make 1 long strip of fabric. Then fold the strip of fabric in half, right sides together longwise, and sew 1/4 inch from the edge. Turn the belt inside out and then press. And to finish it off, you can tie knots at the ends. And giving your garment a finishing press like always, we are done with our romantic poppy dress. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this inspires you to sew this beautiful dress yourself. I know you'll love it. You can get the PDF downloadable sewing pattern that I used at the link in the description of this video, and happy sewing!